Holy RP. I kept fast forwarding to see some action, but it was all just talking and a bit of movement in a tavern. For 3 hours. Wow. No wonder you inject a lot of caffeine. If I were playing in that session, I wouldn't have made it through the first half. Hello friends, welcome back to GM Philosophy in the Morning. I'm the GM Philosopher. This is the channel where we empower game masters to run better games. Guys, there's been some drama. But it's not really drama. What it really is it's new information, something really important to talk about, and I want to talk about this. Now, if you haven't joined the GM Philosophy Discord, links in the description, you should do this because that's where this happened, guys. The other night, I played in a game that I'm a player in. DM Ramos of Dungeons & 20s runs his D&D 5e game, Crimson Basgoth, the Crimson Blade, and I'm a player in this game, being the chosen of Ganache, one of the gods of the orcs. And in this game, there's a lot of roleplay, a lot of in-depth roleplay, okay? And there's not always a bunch of combat. There is combat, but not in every session. Well, a really interesting thing happened, and I want to share this with you because this ties into something that I've been thinking about lately, which is what is the perfect formula for a D&D session? What's the perfect formula to make it enjoyable for everyone? Now, I run 4 different pro games. You can find my pro games on Start Playing, links in the description. And I'm always trying to find out, how can I make my games better? Should there be more of this? Should there be more of that? I'm always trying to back engineer how to get the perfect formula. And I got some really interesting clues, information that I thought were interesting, and I want to share them in this. When I shared this video, some people were a little critical of the more like RP element. There's more talking, more hanging around, not much going on, and less combat seems to equal less interesting. But then there were people who came in and said different things about it, okay? Now, first of all, I have to say, everybody who I'm going to feature, I'm going to show you some stuff that people said about this, okay? Now, if you want to watch the actual gameplay that I'm talking about, link to that is in the description. Feel free to go watch that. I have a great time playing in that game. It is sometimes a very chill game. I feel that it is very immersive, very fun for me to roleplay the character I'm roleplaying in that game. The Lawful Evil Minotaur Bard, Gram Bazek. There's a lot of character development and stuff like that. I have a lot of fun doing it. I do understand that people have different tastes and styles when it comes to playing games, but I want you to go take a look at that video and just kind of see what I'm talking about. Like, get it, because that game got live streamed. The game gets live streamed. And then I want you to hear these comments about it. Now, for those of you who are game masters, you may be wondering, what do people think of combat versus more RP? Or should there be more exploration? Does it have to be a dungeon crawl all the time? What if you have a session where people are mostly doing dialogue and talking and character development? Is this boring? Is this good? These are some of the things that were said in the Discord. And this became such a big conversation, and it's really useful, and I want to talk about it. So let's dive into it. Now, first of all, we have what Stuart said. Now, Stuart, I really, really like Stuart. I would say we are friends. We're colleagues. He's in the Discord. We talk a lot about a lot of things. I think that Stuart seems like, I've never been in one of his games, but I think he's a fantastic game master. But here's what he had to say when he watched the live stream. Holy RP. I kept fast forwarding to see some action, but it was all just talking and a bit of movement in a tavern. For 3 hours. Wow. No wonder you inject a lot of caffeine. If I were playing in that session, I wouldn't have made it through the first half. Is that common in games? I played VTT for 3 years before running my own game, and have never seen anything that slow and full of conversation. I've seen a few that were kind of close. Just curious if that style of game is common for others. So this is what Stuart had to say, right? And by the way, I really welcome all of you to drop a comment, especially if you click through and watch the live stream episode I'm referencing, because I want to hear what you think, guys. I legitimately want to hear. Basically, what I'm looking at is what elements make up a universally good D&D session? Is it exploration and combat and role play? Or, what if it's more of one, less the other? Is it all about subjectivity? I'm really interested in hearing what you think. I want to know, because I'm trying to perfect the formula, guys. I want to perfect the formula. Now, I do have my opinions about this, what Stuart said and more, but there's some more comments that I want to read, okay? Let's read this next one. This is it's Kayla. I've had a few like this where it was really RP heavy, and then the next session we fought stuff back to back. I like a lot of the heavy RP stuff, sometimes personally, okay? Now, Kayla is a player in, at this point, I think 3 of my games. She's really awesome role player, sort of new to my games and my channel, and I'm just really, really pumped to have her in there. So that's what she had to say. Now, William, the game master for this session, came in and said this. It for sure depends on the table. This group is heavy RP for sure, but I believe it falls mainly on the group. But I have other games I've run that are much more action heavy, even having combat every session. Though most of my pro games and regular games tend to be more RP with the current group I have right now. As I, a player, enjoy deep role play, sometimes rather caring to miss combat if the role play is good in the group. So this is what William, the game master, said. Now I have to say again, William, awesome fellow, a friend of mine, a colleague. William is a player in my Monday 1 a.m. game, and I play in William's game on Sunday nights. So again, like all of these people, I like all these people. I know all these people to an extent personally. So I'm very interested in these different ideas. Now, Panpiper comes in. Now, Panpiper is a more recent player in one of my games, a recent awesome contributor to the Discord and the live streams. Panpiper is playing Poe, a good cleric of Benevolon and Justicar in my Tuesday morning game, which is more of a good aligned group. And Panpiper's been an awesome addition and an awesome player. I have a lot of respect for him. Now, here's what he said about this take. I've seen heavy combat groups. That's groups that couldn't RP their way out of a wet paper bag, happily spend entire game sessions without combat. This is because they found themselves in a city with actual magic item vendors and NPCs that could make magic items to order. The opportunity was meaningful to the players, and they were more than happy to explore the offerings and discover how they could boost themselves. I've also seen games devoted to one or a couple of dedicated role players utterly monopolize entire sessions babbling on about nonsense, utterly irrelevant to the others who just wanted to do something. GMs have to be able to read the table. If they have a group of people, all of whom share the action bug, all of whom have rich character backstories and who are invested in the world and the situation presenting in their world, the GM can read it by the degree of their engagement in the conversation. With such a group, sessions without combat could easily be the norm. If, however, there are within the group those who are regularly silent, who have little to say while the role players prattle on, then the GM is advised, in my opinion, to ensure there is action in every session, lest those more quiet players move on to a game they find more meaningful to them. So that's what Panpiper had to say. Now, there's another comment, and this is very interesting. This comes from Waz. Now, Waz, I have a lot of respect for. Not only has Waz been a player in my games in the past, he was a player in my Barrenlands campaign, but he is also currently a player in my 1 a.m. Monday game of the Darkest Dawn, and he's a really, I would say, a crucial and main staple individual contributor in the Discord. Waz has been in the channel for quite a while now and is what I would consider one of the OGs here at GM Philosophy. So let's see what Waz had to say about this. I am guessing you are the video game player that always hits the skip button. Now, Waz was actually replying to Stuart's comment. And if you remember, Stuart was the one, who said, holy RP. I kept fast forwarding to see some action, but it was all just talking and a bit of movement in a tavern for 3 hours. No wonder you inject a lot of caffeine. If I were playing in that session, I wouldn't have made it through the first half. This is what Stuart said. So this was Waz's response to that. I am guessing you are the video game player that always hits the skip button, then complains when the story doesn't make sense. You are only getting a third of the game experience if all you want is combat. Sorry, but as a player in that game, you tried to bypass all the important points. I would completely detest campaigns with nothing but combat. I love all 3 aspects of TTRPGs, the combat, the exploration, and all of the social RP side of the game. Maybe you would enjoy Warhammer or Trench Crusade, which is all combat. Okay, so one other thing to note is that Waz is a player in the game that I'm referencing, along with me. We literally play together in that game, which is William's game, okay? William of Dungeons & 20s. Now, another one of the players from that game, Ukamimaru, actually also commented on this video and it seems to be responding kind of to Stuart's comment as well. Stuart, the one being, the one saying, holy RP, there's so much RP, 3 hours without any action and such and such. So now here's what Uka Memaru said about the session. I understand that there are different tables for different players and that not every game is going to be someone's cup of tea. But at the same time, guys, if you open to chapter 52 of a book and have no idea what's happening, it might be a good idea to look further back in the book. This group just came back from the Hells and fought a massive battle against a number of devils with their souls hanging in the balance. But you opened the book to the part where they are all having mental breakdowns and dealing with the aftermath of choices made that can't be undone. D&D is group storytelling. Some may want to tell an action-packed adventure where combat never ends, while others want to tell a Tolkien-level epic where characters and their development is a major part of the story. Neither is wrong. To be arguing and attacking each other over the ways you like to play a cooperative game is just silly. Be respectful, have fun, and remember, we all love the game, ladies and gentlemen. So that, Uka Mimaru is saying a lot of true things here, and this is true. This was what I call sort of a transition session, a glue character development session. There was some stuff going on in the session that was building character development, and sometimes those character developing sessions that are more RP and less combat, they build up to and then give more emotion to the combat sessions. I also think it's funny that there was As you can probably tell, there was a tiny bit of drama going on in some of these comments. In fact, Panpiper actually responded and made another comment, which is this: I too checked out the video. I listened to a good 30 minutes of it, understanding little given my limited context. I was intrigued by the character art and curious as to their builds and getting a few clues from the RP. I started stepping through the stream in 5-minute increments to see if anything else happened that could give me more hints. I got to the end of the stream and nothing happened but a lot of talking. I am used to a fair amount of RP and can also throw down in a fight with the best of them. All talk sessions I have seen, but are also, in my experience, relatively rare in most groups. It is no stretch to me that someone seeing such a game might question what was going on. Okay. So with that being said, you can see that there was a little bit of like drama back and forth going on in these comments, but I think that there's a general thread here that gives us a clue into something that I've been thinking a lot about. And this is kind of what I want to transition into and discuss in response to these comments. It brings to light what people are looking for in a game. Now, there's obviously subjectivity going on. When we're running a D&D game, there's obviously going to be some subjectivity, guys. However, I want to give you my 2 cents on this and what I believe is probably like where I'm arriving at. I do have some thoughts about this. And here's where I'll start. Personally, I believe that the number one goal for a game master is to empower the players to tell an amazing story of their character. They should be doing this in a manner that the players enjoy very much. I talk a lot about this in my book, The Advanced Art of TTRPG Game Mastery, which is all about building emotional resonance in your games. If you want to grab that, link's in the description. For the price of a cup of coffee, you can learn all of my secrets about building emotional resonance, games that players love and want to keep coming back to. And I will say that I believe that the formula for this is actually pretty similar to an even distribution of combat, role play, exploration and discovery, and a bit of drama. But here's really the magic ingredient. None of that is going to matter if what's going on in the game doesn't matter to the player characters. If the players don't care, then it doesn't matter how well blended all those things are, none of it's going to matter. So the first step is getting them to care. How do you get them to care? Well, this starts with the game premise, right? This starts with them creating characters that they're excited to play. And this starts with you working with them to create backstories, probably that integrate into the world, or at least backstories for the characters that will give them stakes in the current adventure. I believe that this is very important. I do believe that different players need this to different extent. For example, I believe that when I'm creating a character, I could probably jump in with no backstory tie-in and really create an epic story. But I am probably, I think, an easier player to run for than some players because I've been a GM for so long and because my thought process around playing in games is probably way more self-advocating and like self-building than a lot of players feel that they have the power to do or even creatively think about. Now, once you get players to be excited about the game and they have buy-in, and then you actually get into the session and you begin creating the story together, because this is an art form, guys. We're creating the story in real time. So what do we do then? How do we blend these things so that players will have a great time? And here's what I have come back around to more and more, guys. I have experimented with this at great length. I've been running games for over 24 years. I've experimented with this. I have tried things. I've succeeded. I've failed. I've run for many different gamers and types of groups at this point. And I'm going to say this. I used to believe that if gamers couldn't sit down and do a zero combat deep role play session, that they probably were not really immersive role players and they probably weren't the kind of group for me. I kind of got to a point where I had this mindset. Now, for the record, I really enjoyed the session I played in William's game the other night. I will say, however, that I have come around to understanding more when players do want some action, some exploration, and, dare I say it, some loot. It's super fun to get loot. It's super fun to fight monsters. I'm not saying it has to happen in every session. In fact, I've characteristically advertised my pro games as combat light, roleplay heavy. And I would still say that that tends to be the norm in my games. However, I have, in the recent month or so, taken a larger step toward trying to make sure that every session contains a little bit of exploration discovery, a little bit of combat at least a little bit of loot, and of course, that immersive roleplay and the drama that comes with it. Now, this is, of course, going to be different for every group because the players are different. But I do believe that as I'm reading these comments, I'm hearing this from everybody. In all these comments, I'm hearing sort of a version of this, but a personal version of it by these respective GMs and players. But I keep hearing this from my own players, and I get good feedback. For example, The other night in my 1 a.m. game, I threw in kind of a surprise combat in the middle of the session that I don't think anyone was expecting at all. I was talking to one of my players about it, and he said he thought it was a good situation. It was like, whoa, that was very surprising. They did not expect me to do that at all, because that was very uncharacteristic of me, especially in that game, which is usually more immersive roleplay, and it can go sessions without a combat. But I've gotten around to the point where I'm thinking, I think this game would be better with more combat. So I've started making an effort to put good exploration and combat in the game. For example, in the beginning of that session, they had actually gotten done with the combat the previous session. So they were kind of exploring the vault and looting it. And then we introduced a new player, and then they came back to the ship. But then there was kind of a surprise combat. It wasn't a big, elaborate combat. It was a couple turns, but I think it was fun. I think it added to the game. This is an example of how I'm trying to evolve my style to be a little bit more, I would say, dialed into a specific type of formula. And the formula is actually very similar to what Waz said in his comment, which was, I'm guessing you are the video game player that always hits the skip button and complains when the story doesn't make sense. You're only getting a third of the experience if all you want is combat. I agree with Waz here. I totally understand what he is saying, because there are times when that deeper role play, it brings character development into focus and brings glue into the story that then makes combat more emotionally evocative, right? It gives us higher stakes. It deepens the story. And so there are elements where sitting through those intense, deep RP glue sessions might seem boring to some people. However, I, as a player, I'm fine to chill in those sessions because I'm focused in on the art of my character. I'm focused in on the art of talking through what my character's doing, thinking through what my character's feeling, right? So for me, this is a creative endeavor. Sometimes when we create things, there are more exciting moments than others. Sometimes you just have to write the scene, even if you're a little tired or it's not completely the funnest scene you've ever written, right? It's not a holiday with exploding fireworks every time you sit down. I believe this is what Waz is kind of getting to. At the same time, let's go back to Stuart's comment. Stuart said, "Holy RP, I kept fast forwarding to see some action, but it was all just talking and a bit of movement in a tavern for 3 hours. Wow, no wonder you inject a lot of caffeine," which I do inject a lot of caffeine, guys. But he also said, if I were playing in that session, I wouldn't have made it through the first half. Is that common in games? I played VTT for 3 years before running my own game and have never seen anything that's slow and full of conversation. So in Stuart's defense, I will say that I'm understanding where he's coming from. And I will also say that what this comment makes me think about is that, sure, deep role play is good, but shouldn't we still have a combat in there to engage some of those quieter players? Panpiper literally said this. I want to go back to this comment, guys. Panpiper said, "I've seen heavy combat groups. That's groups that couldn't RP their way out of a wet paper bag. Happily spend entire game sessions without combat. This is because they found themselves in a city with actual magic item vendors and NPCs that could make magic items to order. The opportunity was meaningful to the players, and they were more than happy to explore the offerings and discover how they could boost themselves." But then he goes on to say, GMs have to be able to read the table. If they have a group of people, all of whom share the acting bug, all of whom have rich character backstories, and who are invested in the world and the situation presenting in their world, the GM can read it by the degree of their engagement in the conversation. With such a group, sessions without combat could easily be the norm. If, however, there are within the group those who are regularly silent, right? So we're talking about split parties here, like parties where there are kind of half action, half role play, right? If, however, there are within the group those who are regularly silent, who have little to say while the role players prattle on, then the GM is advised, in my opinion, to ensure there is action in every session, lest those more quiet players move on to a game they find more meaningful to them. In other words, we want to develop meaning for everyone in the session to the best we can. And with that being said, I have to go back and say that Stuart has a point. Should we really have a session that is 3 or 4 hours where everyone is just role playing around the table? Well, the answer is it depends. It kind of depends on whether the players are enjoying it, but it also depends on whether or not we care about that balance formula of exploration and discovery, immersive roleplay and drama, combat and action, and then loot. I actually think I'm going to start including getting loot as a foundational part of the formula, because guys, as a player, I have to be really honest with you. I love getting sweet loot. I love finding cool, weird magic items. I love finding old swords. I love getting gold and spending it on stuff to make my character more blinged out and awesome. I love it. And thus, I have to also double down on Stuart's comment and maybe reiterate, the question deserves to be asked. Should we ever have a session that doesn't contain those classic D&D elements? Is it irresponsible for a game master to even run a game that doesn't include those classic elements. I think that there are a lot of game masters out there who would probably say yes, and it sounds like Stuart might be one of them. And I don't know that I entirely disagree. Now, it's also true that different GMs are going to have different styles and they're going to appeal to different players. And that's okay too. It's subjective in that sense. But when I'm talking about running pro games, when I'm talking about trying to run games with what I would call broader mainstream appeal, and I'm not saying that in a negative way. By the way, if you want to hear more about my process for running paid games, grab my book, The Paid GM Guidebook, all about how to actually successfully run paid games and start playing and make it into a viable business. You can grab that. Link is in the description. For about the price of 2 cups of coffee, learn how I went from having no paid games to having 4 full paid games that are going really, really, really well with higher player retention and with really, really fun sessions. But anyway, I have to say that at the end of the day, I'm coming back around to saying we should have all 4 of these in every session to even a little degree. We should have some exploration and discovery. We should have some combat, even if it's just a little bit. We should have some drama and some immersive role play, and we should have some loot. That's what I think. I'm coming back around to that, guys. This is what I'm coming to do. I've never been running this much D&D at once. I would say I've never run better games than I'm running right now in my Darkest Dawn campaigns. But I'm also going to say that I think I'm learning that formula is the winning formula that makes the game really fun and exciting. This is what I think. Drop a comment. Let me know what you think. I hope that this video has been interesting and entertaining for you. If so, guys, hit that thumbs up button and drop a subscribe for me. I'd really appreciate it. Hey, thank you all for coming back for another episode of GM Philosophy in the Morning. Empowering Game Masters run better games is the goal. Roll some D100s for me at your next game, guys, because they're my favorite dice. And we'll see you on the next one.